The New Jersey Offshore Grand Prix off the coast of Point Pleasant, New Jersey had 7 starters in Offshore 1. Super Brute with Jerry Jacoby, The Collection with Jose Rodriguez, Michelob Light with Tom Gentry, Fava Shoes with George Morales, Popeyes with Al Copeland, Flapjack with Howard Quam, and Top Banana with Dirk Patriarca. The 7 boats started out for a phenomenal Offshore 1 start as they headed to checkpoint 1. With Jerry Jacoby running in 4th place right there in his new Super Brute, with Flapjack and Howard Quam out in front, and Popeyes and Michelob Light running 2nd and 3rd. Flapjack is a 37.5-foot active cat powered by 2 725 horsepower engines. Offshore 2 got off to an exciting start with 8 contenders. Dan Weinstein and Power Play returned to the circuit for this race in a 32-foot Cougar with 2 600 horsepower Chevy engines. Lou Cooper was also in there, Miss Gallo Wine, Willie Falcon and Seahawk, and Larry Smith from Guilford, Connecticut returned in his 33-foot Suffin Outrageous. Scorpio, a new sport boat with Al Dorenzo, and Indecent Exposure with Robert Picards. Seahawk went out in the lead in Offshore 2 start, and Power Play with Dan Weinstein was right behind, a super contender in Offshore 2. Dan's 32-foot Cougar at the present time is the fastest in Offshore 2. Offshore 3 also got off to an exciting start with 14 entries. In Offshore 4, we had 16 entries, the largest fleet in offshore powerboat racing this season. With the water conditions as they were off of Point Pleasant Beach, catamarans and Deep V had a super type of race course. Here we see Lance Rupel in Strobolite. Lance is last year's defending world champion. He's running a 28-foot Manta with 3 240 horsepower Mercury outboards. We went out to the course to find some of the action in Offshore 3, and we found Y100 with Dave Ross, Bill Schlick, and Ed Martinez. Y100 is a 32-foot Cobra with 2 500 horsepower Chevy engines. As you can see, they had this boat well dialed in for the 108-mile course that they had to run today. We moved up the course to pick up our first place leader in Offshore 3 and found Seahawk with Sal Magluta from Miami, Florida. Seahawk is a 31-foot Seahawk hull with 2 500 horsepower KS&W engines. In 3rd place was our new entry, the old Lovett boat, now named Ooh La La Sasson, with Joey Ratner. Ooh La La Sasson is a 30-foot Shadow Cat with 2 500 horsepower Mercury engines. As you can see here, sea conditions were just not about right for a cat, but obviously they had this boat well dialed in for today's race. Well, we see you're out here with a new name on the boat. Can you tell us all about it, Joey?
Well, we're very fortunate to be racing now under the colors of this Sassoon company, known for their jeans and clotheswear. We're going to have a very good year for them.
How do you feel about the boat and the conditions here at Point Pleasant?
Well, we like the wind. Even though it's not real heavy, it's enough to keep us airborne. And we're going to do very well here.
Can you tell me about your crew and their positions?
Certainly. The crew, first of all, the boat is the U.S. World Champion from 1982. And they won 5 races last year, 4 in a row. Last year was throttled by Dave Gilmore, known as Gilly, and he, of course, is going to be throttling tomorrow. And Jack Tate, who's our crew chief and also our navigator. So we have all the luck running from last year, and we're carrying it forward this year under the Sassoon name.
What kind of equipment are you using on board, such as your drives and engine?
Well, we feel very strong about Mercury. We have a very good relationship with them, and they have strong equipment with good backup service. So they're here right now. They're working on making sure everything is very fine-tuned, and they'll tomorrow morning once again fine-tune everything, so we'll be strong for tomorrow.
Joey, a lot of people want to know what brought you into offshore racing. What made you get into this type of rough sport?
Well, I've been, in one way or another, involved with offshore racing since the mid-'60s. The last couple of years I haven't been active, but my father-in-law, who's Lou Cooper in Mescala Wine, has been active. And my wife has insisted that we come along and root for him. And I just couldn't stand to be here and be on the ground, on the shore, so we had to get a boat and make it all happen again. So now my wife comes, she's got 2 people to root for, but she hasn't told my father-in-law or I who she really wants to win.
Well, obviously one of the benefits is he's running in sport class and you're in modified.
Yes, that's the key piece in the family.
Obviously, Mercury had this boat well tuned for the Ooh La La Sasson boat. This Shadow Cat and Joey and his crew took a terrific pounding off the New Jersey coast for the New Jersey Offshore Grand Prix. As we move further up the course, we found Bob Erickson from Minnetonka, Minnesota in the Erickson Racing Team boat. The Erickson Racing Team is in a 30-foot Shadow Cat with 2 550 horsepower KS&W engines. Another Shadow Cat in Offshore 3 was Dan Richards from Englewood, New Jersey in the Sunoco Express. The Sunoco Express is a 30-foot Shadow Cat with 2 400 horsepower Chevy engines. Here we see Bob Shear and Gary Jeffries in Sheer Terra, a super contender in Offshore 3. Sheer Terra is a 30-foot flight marine cat with 2 500 horsepower Keith Hazel engines and being pushed along the New Jersey coast with Arneson drives. We had a chance to talk with Howard Arneson right before the race to explain more about the Arneson drive system. Howard, how many Arneson drives are we using here in offshore powerboat racing in the various classes at the moment?
I think there are either 7 or 8 boats here today that have the drives. And okay, Bobby Shear won 3 and Express won 3 in a row.
So obviously we're going to set some new records with boats in various classes other than production class, all with Arneson drives.
We certainly hope so. I think there are 4 open class boats here today with drives on it. No, 3 open class boats. Our other boat's not here.
The next race that we'll see Tony Garcia in?
Hopefully it's Saugatuck with a big boat. That's our goal.
Well, let me ask you, Howard, which one of the group of boats out here using your drives are going to be for you tomorrow?
Well, I have mixed emotions about everything. I want them all to win. I'd like them all to come across the finish line all just even. That would suit me fine. I'd like them all to finish, too.
Well, we'll look for you in Saugatuck.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Howard. As we were following Bobby Shear in Sheer Terra and looking at the rest of the modified class, we realized they had missed a buoy and were headed north up the New Jersey coast. So we pulled off the course to see who else we could find that was running the course correctly. And we found the new Super Brute with Jerry Jacoby, Bart Corton, and Wayne Vickers. The Super Brute is a 37.5-foot cigarette with 2 700 horsepower Hawk Marine engines. Here you can see how well the Super Brute ran off the New Jersey coast. It was good to have US 1 back on the offshore racing circuit under the colors of Super Brute, sponsored by Fabergé. Jerry led the race for more than 3/4 of the way until he experienced some mechanical difficulties and finished third for the New Jersey Offshore Grand Prix. We move further up the course to find two great competitors in Offshore 1. Michelob Light with Tom Gentry from Honolulu, Hawaii. The Michelob Light is a 38-foot Cougar with two 650 horsepower KS&W engines. We also found Al Copeland from Jefferson, Louisiana in Popeyes. Popeyes is a 41-foot Cougar with two 700 horsepower Mercruiser engines. There are many combinations that can be used in offshore powerboat racing. As an example, the Michelob Light is a Cougar Cat with KS&W engines being pushed along with Arneson drives. The Popeyes is also a Cougar Cat, but being powered by Mercury inboards and Mercury stern drives. In all forms of powerboat racing, you find an incredible combination of hull design, power plant, and drive system. A great deal has to do with the type of crew that you have also. An experienced throttleman, driver, and navigator put you through some incredible courses. So putting it together is a main function in offshore powerboat racing. As we flew further up the course, we found Jose Rodriguez from Miami, Florida in the collection. The collection is a 38-foot Cougar with two 670 horsepower KS&W engines. But there's a little something different about this Cougar Cat. It's all aluminum. And this is what Joe had to say right before the race. Joe, what type of boat are you running here in Offshore 1?
It's an aluminum Cougar Cat, 38 foot long, with power by KS&W with Arneson drives.
I understand it's the only aluminum Cat. Was there a reason why you chose an aluminum version rather than the wood one?
Well, I've just seen too many wood ones, breaking apart. It's a constantly, maintenance. They constantly need somebody to be working on them and changing pieces. They break a lot, and I decided aluminum would be a lot safer, be a lot more, how can I tell, be lighter and less maintenance.
Tell us about your throttle man.
It's Jack Studeville. It's a very, very good throttle man. For me, I consider him the top in the world. He's been in the business for longer than anybody else, I think. And him and Sammy been there for a long, long time.
But there's another one that you cannot forget, and that's Bob Adoni, a world champion throttleman in Fava Shoes. Fava Shoes is a 38-foot Cougar with two 700 horsepower Mercruiser engines and stern drives. George Morales is driving, and they're all from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Fava Shoes is a wooden Cougar Cat. Out of the 5 that were out there, only the collection was the only aluminum hull from Cougar in Offshore 1. Fava Shoes holds the prestigious world speed record at the present time of 94.77 miles per hour, which was accomplished in the Stroh's Downriver Challenge for 1983. Here we see Larry Smith from Guilford, Connecticut, in Outrageous. Outrageous is a 33-foot Suffin with two 550 horsepower Mercruiser engines. we see P100 Imperial Lakes, driven by Gene Whip of Sarasota, Florida. The Imperial Lakes is a 30-foot velocity with 3 235 horsepower Johnson outboards. Out of the 16 boats that started in Offshore 4, only 2 finished the race correctly in first and second position. And Gene, at this period of time, was running in second place behind Black Duck. Obviously, there was some type of navigational error on the course, and we'll soon find out. But here we come up on Black Duck, P1, who was running in first place. Black Duck is driven by Peter Atkin from South Norwalk, Connecticut, and Tom McCurry. It's a 30-foot Shadow Cat with 3 250 horsepower Mercury outboards. As we returned out to the course, after Black Duck was heading in for its Offshore 4 victory, we find Michelob Light in first place. It's a 38-foot Cougar Cat with 2 650 horsepower KS&W engines, and it's driven by Tom Gentry and world-famous, internationally well-known throttleman Sammy James from LaBelle, Florida. Tom and Sam probably were feeling extremely well. They had an average speed of 65.34 miles per hour. So we headed back up the course into the finish line to pick up our modified class winner, Y100, with Dave Ross. Dave had some very interesting comments on what happened in the New Jersey Offshore Grand Prix.
Dave Ross, winner of the modified class, Class 3 in the Y100. How was it out there, Dave?
It was, well, we took everybody on a little tour in New York City, but it was rough going out to the far leg there, and it proves it's a real team sport. I'll tell you, our boat was put together. Bill Schlick put the boat together beautifully, stayed together in the rough stuff out there, and we missed that outer mark, and then we decided when we saw the World Trade Center, knew we were in the wrong place. But Eddie set a course coming back, and we found the boat, that outer mark, and we were able to take the whole course. And since I ran out of gas in Detroit, we pulled up to the very top, and we came in on fumes. We literally died when we hit the finish line.
Now, how does this put you in the point situation?
I think number 2 now. I think number 2. We're back on track now. Back on track.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Pete Atkin of Norwalk, Connecticut. Winner here in the New Jersey Offshore Grand Prix, and right now number 1 in points. How is it out there, Pete?
Well, as you look out and back here, it looks pretty placid, but there was an offshore leg here that took us 21 miles out into the Atlantic, and it was a very rough leg. It was 6-7 foot waves, and they're coming at you from all different directions, and it's probably the roughest leg I've been on yet in my 3 years on the circuit, and it beat us up pretty bad. But it was exciting, but it's one of those things when you ask yourself why you're doing this sport. You know, it's supposed to be fun, but it was pretty nasty.
Who is your toughest competitor?
Well, as we were going out there, I was surprised to see a couple of the Shadow Cats like ours right there with us, John D'Elia in Special Edition, but John Carbonell was out in front in the big Imperial installer, the 34-foot Coyote, and John was running good in that stuff, and we couldn't keep up with him, and we were just trying to stay with them and hope that when we got back into the calmer area on shore, we could scoot in front of them. But as you're probably well aware of, there was some navigation mistakes out there, and they went on up to New York, I guess, along with a sizable amount of the other classes, which we almost did. But I did that 2 weeks ago, a month ago, in Cape Coral, Florida, and I was determined not to do it again. So I stopped and I took the time, and we realized we'd gone past the buoy, the mark out there, and we turned around and found it and came in.
You've got an incredible winning streak. What do you attribute that to?
I actually contribute most of it to my co-driver and chief mechanic, Tom McCurry, who his preparation of the boat is meticulous. Every race, everything has just gone over 2 or 3 times. He rebuilds all the motors himself. And as you know, in this sport, reliability is more important than anything. Just being able to stay together to the finish. And I contribute that to Tom McCurry.
Congratulations, Pete. Good race.
Here in Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey, the second win for the Michelob Light Racing Team this year, and the Hall leads in national points now by 195 after today's victory. The driver, Tom Gentry from Honolulu. The throttle man from LaBelle, Florida. His name is Sammy James. Let's talk to the driver, the man who steers. Tom Gentry, has to be exciting. This is your first win in the Michelob Light.
Yeah, it's terrific. Great show, great day, and great water.
This man that's standing next to you handles the throttles. You steer. That's kind of an eerie feeling. I don't know if I'd want to steer and trust somebody else to the speed.
Well, that's true. Occasionally we look at each other and wonder, but it all works out in the end.
What about the water conditions? How were they today? The speed wasn't that high.
Oh, that's right, but I think we had good ocean racing conditions, and that's what it's all about. The boat performed very, very well in that water.
All right, as a throttle man handling the trim tab, Sammy James, the water was catamaran water, not deep V.
I don't know, that outside leg was deep V water because the deep V led the first lap out there, but we all backed off and cooled it with the cats and just chose our time, and there was areas on the course where we could run up to 100 miles an hour if we wanted to. So we ran in our water and they ran in theirs, but we come out winning.
Okay, now come right down to it. You sat in about third slot there for about the first 50 or 60 miles. Was that planned?
Well, that's what Tom wanted to do from the very beginning. He told me he just want to lay back in second or third, and then about the end couple laps, and we try to take the race, and that's just exactly what we did. We followed our plan that he wanted to run.
The winning combination, Tom Gentry from Honolulu, and from LaBelle, Florida, Sammy James. They're the Michelob Light winning team here today in Offshore Open Class 1.
130-mile-per-hour motorcycle action at Syracuse, New York. Al Holbert scores again in IMSA Road Racing. And Motor Week puts you in the driver's seat at the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. All this and more today on television's fastest half hour. Now let's go to round 4 of the American Powerboat Association Offshore Championship, the inaugural New Jersey Offshore Grand Prix. Despite rough seas, the catamarans found smooth New Jersey sailing. That's the dominant design in the open class this season. Early leader Howard Quam was the first victim of a string of mechanical woes that left only 3 open boats running after 200 miles. One big story here, sponsor debuts by Sassoon and Sunkist. Another was the return of defending national champ Jerry Jacoby. Sidelined early in the year by lack of funds, his boat Super Brute now has big backing from Fabergé. Jacoby found himself leading the open class until he too suffered a mechanical problem. That left the lead to Tom Gentry in the same boat Tony Garcia drove to 5 straight wins in the 1982 World Championship. In the final miles, Gentry held off Jose Rodriguez in his boat called Collection. Gentry takes his first win of the year, while Jacoby limped home for third. In pro stock, Pete Atkin remains the man to beat. The defending national champ took his third win in 4 starts. We take a look at the results, and how about that action in the modified class? The entire field got lost, and David Ross raced 70 extra miles en route to his first ever boat win. I'm Dave Despain for Motor Week Illustrated.
And this is what Cable News Network has to say about offshore-type powerboat racing.
That one spectacular crash encompasses all the factors that are making powerboat racing one of the fastest-growing spectator sports in the country: noise, speed, color, and danger. Like all racing, noise is an integral part of the scene. Auto racing has nothing on this sport. There are 2 types of powerboats, both of which put out an overwhelming roar. The hydroplanes use an old airplane engine to power their sleek designs across the water. The twin-hulled catamarans can have as many as 4 truck engines, 1,000 cubic inches in size, revving up to 1,500 horsepower. The catamarans also carry 3-man crews with a driver, a navigator, and a separate throttle man to put the pedal to the metal. With that kind of power, the speeds are enormous. The airplane engines used to propel World War II fighters through the air at 300 to 400 miles per hour. Now they drive the hydroplanes nearly 200 miles per hour against the resistance of wind and water. The hydroplanes hit 180 miles an hour in the straightaways with an average winning speed of 130. The catamarans can hit speeds of 100 miles per hour in the open ocean. Noise and speed are part of all racing. What sets this sport apart is the water. The shimmering blue sea cut open by a darting, brightly painted speedboat against a rising skyline is one of the most dramatic settings in sport. It has drawn spectators to powerboat racing in record numbers, particularly in hydroplaning, where crowds average in the hundreds of thousands. Hydroplaning draws more because it lends itself to spectators with a 2.5-mile oval course. The offshore catamaran courses can be as long as 200 land miles in a zigzagging or triangular layout. While offshore can take as many as 8 cameras to televise, unlimited hydroplaning can be covered with 3. 9 of the 10 races in the hydroplaning season will be on national TV this year. The power, speed, and beauty of this sport are attracting record numbers of fans. But another inevitable fact of racing is the crash. Up until this year, the odds were high that you'd see one. Between 1950 and 1982, 15 drivers lost their lives on the water, with hydroplaning losing 2 of its champions in less than a year, with the deaths of Bill Munsey and his successor, Dean Chenoweth. Out of these grim surroundings, Betty Cook has arisen as a 2-time offshore world champ to balance the sport's daredevil image. Cook, a tiny grandmother from California who has reached her 60th birthday, goes out on that same thin line as the men, bordering the delirium of victory and disaster.
I don't really think about the danger of it. If I get to a point where there's a situation that I can't handle, slow down. You know, people are more important than boats.